What's up, YouTube? Des the Mess back once again. My pronouns are she, her, and they, them, and today we're going to be talking about politics, philosophy, and how they relate to video games. So, I've played a number of different video games in my life. There are tons of different philosophical, political themes running through a lot of games that I've played. In fact, I would argue every single video game, with the exception of maybe Tetris or Pong, things in that vein. So I'm only going to touch on series that I've played through most of my life because I have more experience with them and therefore I can speak more on them. But there are a number of series that I will mention that I know have themes underlying. For instance, the Final Fantasy games tend to have an anti-capitalist theme. Lots of motorcycles today. An anti-capitalist theme running underneath them. Very anti-imperialist. The major boss in some of those games is a giant corrupt corporation, basically, or the military-industrial complex. There's a lot of themes about that sort of stuff. So we're going to be exploring those today. First, I want to start off with something that is akin to Final Fantasy, but not technically Final Fantasy. The waters get a little bit muddied here. The Kingdom Hearts series is one that is met with as much love as it is met with hate. Some people don't like the fact that Disney essentially mashed a bunch of their characters with a bunch of Final Fantasy characters and created this entire franchise. The lore can get a bit convoluted. They tend to release a game, introduce a bunch of weird plot holes and other stuff, and then release a game later and be like, remember that thing that we forgot to really mention much and how nobody understood why this other thing happened? Well, that just comes up in this game so that we can explain how it happened. There's a weird timeline, so like the games were not released in chronological order based on when they take place in the world. They were spotty at best. There isn't always a clear timeline about when things happen. You know, sometimes there's a number of years that are obvious, other times it's kind of assumed that something is in the past. Anyway, I haven't played every single one of the Kingdom Hearts games. There are a ton of them. I want to focus on the themes that they represent with duality, right? Dualism, darkness versus light specifically. It's kind of brought up in the first game that darkness is the bad thing and light is the good thing. There's nothing really in between yet, and they really focus on that for a large portion of the game. So I guess spoiler alert for literally every one of these games that I'm talking about, but if you haven't played some of these games, and you might never, stick around. I'm not going to explore the lore of every single one of them. I would be here for hours. I'm trying to keep this somewhat short. Every time I say that, it's like an hour, by the way. But I digress. So, the first game focuses on the hero of light, Sora, who comes into the possession of a Keyblade, which is this all-powerful MacGuffin weapon that basically can help him save the day. But the Keyblade can also be used to corrupt and destroy, whereas his best friend, who later becomes the, rival / main antagonist of the story, Riku, is tempted by the darkness because he wants to be stronger and he wants to explore more worlds. So the big thing I have to say about Kingdom Hearts is instead of like planets, I mean, there kind of are planets. It's really weird. It's not really dimensions. They call different places that you go to worlds, right? Which is a normal terminology for a video game. But essentially, you can only travel to different worlds if you have magical or technological means. And not everyone knows that other worlds exist. So the world of Tarzan doesn't necessarily know that the people in Halloween Town exist, or the people in Sora's hometown of Destiny Island exist. They all are under the assumption that their world is the only world, right? It would be like having a countless number of different Earths with all different storylines unfolding, and your main character just kind of shows up and is like, oh, by the way, we're from another world and we're here to save yours. Which, of course, some of the characters appreciate, and some of them are like, no, you're a corrupter, I know what you're here to do. There's a lot of like, should you interfere in the affairs of other worlds, which I think kind of makes sense as far as if I'm looking at it from like a colonialism sort of perspective, which is like, should we be interfering with, I mean, we have, right? White Europeans have come into contact with numbers of indigenous tribes and cultures and either, enslaved or eradicated them. They've corrupted them in some way because they had stronger military and overwhelming political and religious forces, and that's really disgusting. So when I look at it from that lens, right, the idea that Sora is supposed to be saving the day, but kind of just shows up to these other worlds uninvited, even though he has to, right? I don't want to get into like the I don't want to say that what Europeans did they had to do, but what I'm saying is in this case I can see the parallel between someone like Sora who really is trying to do the right thing and sometimes causes more trouble than he should have, even though because it's a video game and everything has to turn out right in the end, he always saves the day, right? But this theme of light versus dark is true on every single world that he visits, where the good guys, if they know about like light as an energy or a magical force, are immediately on his side, and then the bad guys are usually corrupted by darkness. There are creatures called heartless, which is basically what happens when a person's gives into the darkness. They give up their body and they become a heartless, so they lose their human shape or whatever shape they took before, and they turn into a grotesque monster. Some of them are just like little shadow people, and some of them are like totally eldritch horror level stuff. So really cool themes, but there is also the thing I want to touch on next is how typically Western culture, I think a lot of cultures do this, but specifically cultures not of color tend to view light as the good thing and darkness as the bad thing, and that can give some racist connotations because of the way that usually white people have othered black people, for instance. So there is a little bit of that. But something I do like about the Kingdom Hearts series is that they end up reconciling that it's not the power that you're using, it's how you use it. So the main antagonist, Riku, for instance, learns to be more in touch with the darkness within him and uses it to do good things instead of letting it corrupt him, right? It's like it's muddy, and I'm trying to be very careful about how I approach this. But it would be like someone recognizing they have a privilege and then using that to further advocate for marginalized folks. That's like the type of energy that I get from that. He recognized he has this great power that has corrupted him, and instead of becoming a bad guy, he is able to kind of have his villain redemption arc and then goes on to be a positive, neutral chaotic or chaotic good character for the rest of the series. He never loses the darkness, he just accepts that it's a part of him. When you get into like emotional themes about how people deal with mental illness and stuff or trauma, I really attach to Riku in that way, right? Like I've always felt like I'm battling this darkness within me, and it was kind of like the depression dragging me down and the traumatic stuff that I've been dealing with for years, basically. And so attaching to that side of it, and not obviously the racism and all the other metaphorical aspects that can get into problematic stuff, but as a character relating to his struggle, not knowing how or when this thing would corrupt him to the point of being beyond redemption, having that sort of perspective on things made me really attached to the character. As the series develops, there ends up being like nothing or nobodies, and that's like this neutral energy It's neither good nor bad, specifically by nature. It just is. And it breaks away in that way from the dualism, right? Like, I always appreciated the series because of the Taoist elements of, like, there is no light without darkness and there is no up without down and all that stuff. I really love Taoist philosophy, and it seems to have a running theme through this. It can even be, even in a comical sense, the juxtaposition between the more serious, like, villains and the Final Fantasy characters versus, like, the comical Goofy and Donald Duck, that follow Sora all through the game. So there's a lot of really good stuff in that series. It's mostly non-problematic. I haven't played every single game, so I can't say that for certain it's beyond problems. I don't think anything is. But it gave me a lot to think about in my teen years into my 20s when I was developing philosophies around what really is good and what really is bad, and does evil exist, and all those sorts of things. So it gave me a lot to think about. The next thing I want to touch on is the Elder Scrolls series. So I got into the Elder Scrolls video games when I was like 18 or 19. I got Oblivion, right? Skyrim didn't exist yet. Skyrim is a whole thing. I could talk about that for hours. So, but Oblivion, takes place in this mystical land of Cyrodiil on the continent of Tamriel. I don't want to get too deep into the lore because I know a lot about it, but there's a lot of themes about politics and racial tensions throughout the entire continent, right? Every single country has its individual struggles, but the underlying conflicts are always racial and political tensions, typically. There's religion, there's a lot of different people doing, worshiping different gods, and how those things can interact with how they treat each other. The main things in Oblivion is that you're, like, in the central of the Empire, right? So at the time that Oblivion takes place, the Empire basically spans the entire known world, all of the continents. Every single country is a member of the Empire, and it's kind of like what America does with embassies. We have embassies in a bunch of different countries and military outposts and stuff. We really shouldn't be doing that. And that's kind of how the Cyrodiilic government functions, right? They have an emperor that everyone kind of answers to, and he makes laws. He kind of lets countries determine some of their own laws, but they do have overarching laws. For instance, in the country of Morrowind, just before the Oblivion game takes place, Morrowind had legal slavery, and the Empire was just like, well, you're not doing it in our country, so we're not going to get rid of your traditions and customs. That would be imposing too much. So it's really weird. They kind of become this, like, neoliberal imperialism, basically, where they're like, we want to respect the fact that you're racist by letting you be racist, but please don't be racist. It's this really annoying, theme basically throughout the whole game, or the series, rather. So Morrowind was the third game in the series, and they had a lot to do with religious beliefs, right? There are 3 demigods, basically. They were humans who became godlike by realizing their true potential through a whole bunch of lore that I'm not going to get into. But essentially, these 3 demigods became almost immortal and became a source of religion for the people who abandoned their old gods. And at the end of that game, you end up killing all of them, and it leaves these people in kind of this, transitional period where some of them bring back their old gods, and some of them end up worshiping the gods of the Empire, basically. There are a lot of pantheons, and they are all essentially the same gods with some differences. So Elder Scrolls lore is extremely fascinating to me. I'm not going to get into all of it, but essentially different aspects of different gods. In this game, of course, the more that you worship a god, the more powerful that god is, and when you stop worshiping it, it loses its power to the point that it will have little to no effect on the world of Mundus, which is what they call their Earth, based on how many people are worshiping that god or the pantheon in general. So different gods can actually move in and out of favor with the people and almost cease to exist. That's a pretty interesting concept, especially when you consider how religion in our world functions pretty similarly. When you stop believing in a religion as a society, it tends to just disappear, and those things lose their power. So, all of this happens in Morrowind, right? They have their false gods of the tribunal, who are the demigods. They have their false gods of the tribunal, who are their demigods, and they fall, and then new gods, old gods take their place. Meanwhile, the story of Oblivion, you're the hero going around saving the day from hell appearing on Earth because of a cult of demon worshippers who are trying to bring a large demonic god to the Earth to destroy it and create their own paradise. They're led by a cult leader who actually creates a place called Paradise where he sends his followers, and the most devout of them who end up there realize that it's actually hell in disguise because he's made them slaves there. So there's a lot of play between philosophy, religion, and politics in this series, which brings us to Skyrim. Skyrim is one of the games of all time. I have love-hate relationship with Skyrim because I've played it since it came out. I was at GameStop on release day, midnight, when it came out, and I didn't get to play my copy until the following day because I had work the next morning. So I didn't get home till late. Anyway, that's removed from the conversation. Skyrim introduces you to a world several hundred years after the events of Oblivion and Morrowind took place, and you're in the country of Skyrim, which has just started a civil war. So for some backtracking, elven supremacists, right? These are elves who do not like humans, and there are 10 races in the 10 playable races, I should say. There are tons of different races in the Elder Scrolls lore, but of the 10 playable races, they each have their own country on the continent of Tamriel. The elven supremacists, the high elves, decide they want to invoke their truth and take it out on the rest of the country, the rest of the continent. So they start a war, basically, saying that the god of the empire, Talos, who used to be a man and then ascended to godhood, is a fake god and therefore needs to be militarily, politically, and religiously, even ethnically, completely disposed of. So they start basically their parade going through each country and saying, get rid of your Talos or your aspects of Talos, and if you don't, we will destroy you. And they all but do that, right? So they go from their home country to the country of Cyrodiil, where the Empire is seated, and they've basically forced the Emperor to give up. He surrendered, and they signed a concordat basically saying that the worship of Talos was illegal because Talos was a man and not a god. There's a lot of lore-heavy stuff here. There are parallels in some ways between, elven supremacists and Nazis essentially wanting their one true religion basically on the world. They're not to say that the Empire is doing good things because it's colonial and imperialist and racist just by definition. It's very military heavy. Like, the whole game of Oblivion, you're surrounded by these guards in this giant gaudy armor. So when these elves come in and they're in these flimsy robes and they just wreck the whole situation, it's like, holy fuck, they have all this military and magic power behind them to overthrow the Empire, essentially. And they basically, the Thalmor, right, these are the elven supremacists, traveling the countries, specifically you're in Skyrim, so when you interact with them, they will say things like, we are going to prove the supremacy of Mare, right? All the elves are called Mare. They're not men, because they're not humans. Mare over men, 1 century at a time. Like, they're so set on proving that elves are the pinnacle of life. Lore-wise, there might be some truth to that, but again, that's a super deep dive I'm not getting into today. The main point of this is we have these elven supremacists who are trying to attack the Empire, who is already, they've taken over most of well, at that point they had taken over the entire continent, and now the elves are coming in and being like, we're gonna basically be the new empire. They don't want to coexist with humans at all. They want them completely eradicated, and they're going to do that through political means if they can't do it militarily. So when the emperor surrenders, this causes a civil war in Skyrim, because a lot of the Nords of Skyrim are very attached to Talos. They worship him, they revere him. He is the hero of mankind. He put the empire into place. They feel like the empire and the emperor are abandoning their roots. And there's this whole upheaval, and they're led by a Nord supremacist, because there's got to be more racism, called Ulfric Stormcloak. So in his city, for instance, it's mostly a Nord city. So when you interact with the NPCs in the city, you'll notice a lot of them are Nords, like more than any other race there. And there is a section for the Dark Elves, the Dunmer they're called, who were refugees, right? So in the years that followed the Oblivion game, there's like this gap before Skyrim, and sometime in that gap, a volcano erupted in Morrowind, and it caused a whole bunch of people to flee their country. And those who came to Skyrim ended up in the city of Windhelm, and essentially they were given the slums to live in. They have poor working conditions. It's like heavily policed. It's weird, right? Because it's heavily policed, but when people actually need something, the guards are nowhere to be found. Your first walk into Windhelm, you're met with a guy just being racist to a dark elf about how she's some sort of a spy and working for the Thalmor just because, and she's like, I'm literally just trying to go home, and you're drunk and being racist. And then you have the opportunity when you interact with her, because it's a choice-based game to some extent, to, she's like, do you also hate dark elves? And you can be like, yes or no, or why would anybody hate you? Why would they think you're spies, specifically? And then it brings up this dialogue about, racial tension in the city. So there's a lot of overarching themes here in the Elder Scrolls series with religion, and how it can be used to both empower and oppress people, how politics play a role in, at the city level, how different people react to different things that you do as a player, or how other NPCs act, or how they view their world. And then, of course, once you get to the macro level of country and continent, you can see how all of these little things, all of the races of Tamriel are racist against each other. There's no... it's similar to our world in that things like racism and imperialism and colonialism exist, but it's a different set of systemic issues, where anyone who's like in their country is going to be oppressing the people who are not from that country just as a default, even though they're all technically under the foot of the Empire and that eventually the Thalmor come in, they're all still kind of doing their own things, and while they have any authority over anybody else, they're just going to treat all of the other races like shit. So the elves in one country are treating the lizards and cats as slaves. They're actual slaves. It's like there are so many layers to this, and I could really go on for hours about the Elder Scrolls lore. I've played Oblivion and Skyrim. I've watched a lot of videos on a lot of the other games, so I know quite a bit about it. But I want to keep moving on. To take away from the more, heavy themes, we're going to talk about something a little bit more lighthearted in Pokemon. I grew up on Pokemon, right? One of my first Game Boy games was a Pokemon game. And it's marketed to children. I accept that. I still play them. As I've gotten older, I can appreciate some of the more mature themes that are in them. They're obviously not gory or sexual or anything like that, but there's a lot of different themes that you don't really understand as a kid, that like now that I'm an adult and I can go back and play those, I can appreciate the themes that they presented. In every game there's like a crime organization. They're all called teams, but they're actually gangs, and they're always causing trouble. In the first series, it was Team Rocket. They're kind of like a mafia, basically. They go around stealing and causing all sorts of ruckus, and their boss is like running one of the Pokemon gyms. You find this out through the course of the game, that he's a gym leader, which, it's kind of like, well, he's corrupt, obviously, and needs to be replaced. And by you defeating him and then continuing on with your story as a Pokemon trainer, he comes to realize that like he might be wrong and maybe he should step away from his responsibilities running Team Rocket and do some soul searching. That's not to say he's a good guy, but I think his character's portrayed as having that sense of growth, right? He's been doing this for years and nothing really seems to be working to his benefit. Again, there's a lot of lore. I'm going to brush over a lot of it because there are so many Pokemon games, and I haven't played all of them either. When you get into the second generation, Team Rocket comes back, but Giovanni is not part of them. They're trying to basically make a comeback. They've like separated into these little pockets, and they're trying to rekindle the flame, basically, that almost burnt out when Giovanni disappeared, because he's been gone for 3 years, right? There's 3 years between the timeline of the first game and the second games. So Team Rocket comes back and they're doing more crime, and they take over a radio tower, and they're like, Giovanni, if you can hear us, like, we're back, we did it. And of course you take them down, and then they're like, we're disbanding permanently. I don't know if that's the case lore-wise or if they come back later, because that isn't fully explored in the second game. But you can see how like these little pockets of Team Rocket were trying to do, just trying to bring back the spirit, if you will, of their former organized crime life, and it just doesn't work. The third generation of games gets into kind of climate related stuff, right? There's nature activism. So now you're in a totally new region. So the first game you're in Kanto, which is just the beginning region of all Pokemon lore, essentially. The second generation you're in Johto, and you get to travel back to Kanto because they're two sides of the same island or something. And now you're in Hoenn in the third game, and it's further away. So the third generation, the two teams that you interact with, right? If you get Ruby version, you're fighting against Team Magma, and if you get Sapphire version, you're fighting against Team Aqua. So there's two teams, and they each have somewhat different stories that intertwine. The story arc for both of them is essentially the same. They want to summon a godlike Pokemon to cause a massive weather problem because they believe their vision of the world is correct. So in Team Magma's case, they want to bring about Groudon, who can cause whole continents to raise up from the ocean because they believe more land means more opportunities for people and Pokemon to exist, which is technically true, but it's like, what are you going to do to the ocean? And what are you going to do if you can't control this demigod Pokemon that you're summoning to, what if he dries up all the oceans? Because that's kind of what he does. That's what he will do if left unchecked. And in Sapphire, it's Kyogre, who is a rain god, right? And they're trying to flood the earth, basically. They're like, we are polluting and we're doing all this terrible stuff to the ocean and we just need to flood the earth. And it's like, but then you're killing all the people and Pokemon on land in favor of those in the water. There's either way you look at it, they're both incidentally genocidal. And to me as a kid, again, I didn't realize how political that could be. The idea that we need to take care of our earth and things need to kind of be in balance. So there's a lot of, even in the first two games, but especially in the third game, they start really honing in on this theme of technology versus nature, right? In that world, humans have developed alongside nature and do their best to try not to interfere with it, right? They don't really use a whole lot of cars. Most of them use bikes. There's a bike path in every Pokemon game where you get a bicycle and you ride on it. And those are built specifically because they know highways are detrimental. So if you need to get from one town to another, in some cases there's a large bike path between them that you're driving on. It's called cycling road. And I love that. I love how environmentally conscious that is. How they're thinking, it's not really talking about pollution so much in that way. But cars are polluters, of course. But it just makes me appreciate that, again, looking back to stuff I missed when I was a kid, that there were these little environmental cues. It's like, hey, if we are all riding bikes, we're polluting less, and we're leaving more space for animals to just be where they are. A lot of people in our world tend to view humans as separate from nature, and that's not true, right? We socially have separated ourselves from nature, but humans are nature. The fact that I'm sitting in this room means that humans turned elements of nature into the wood and the curtains and the couch and the chair I'm sitting on and all of that stuff. We're not separate from it on a physical sense, right? We are nature. We are animals. We just happen to be, in some respects, the most intelligent species on the planet. So being able to reconcile that I am a part of nature. If I go outside, there's sidewalk and there's streets and there's pavement and there's buildings. It's all city. It's San Francisco. I have to go for quite a bit before I get to the water. And then once I see it, I'm reminded again, I am in nature. What we did to nature for our own benefit is pretty disgusting. I know that humans need a place to live, but we have never in our world considered fully the impact of what developing cities will do to the environment, to animals, and all that stuff. So when I go back and look at these games, I can really appreciate the message they're trying to send, which is that in their world, they have socialized healthcare and they give a fuck about animals and they want to do the right thing. They keep pollution to a minimum. And then in our world, we're doing the opposite. We just don't care about anything. We view ourselves as fully individualistic members of this fake society that's all plastic and concrete, and we just accept that, and we think that somehow makes us both better than and separate from the nature that we have destroyed to build all of this. So that's a pretty heavy take for a Pokemon game, and there are a lot of these themes. I'm not going to touch on every single game because they all do have different themes, but I wanted to focus on the first 3 generations in the series and how there are politics and, environmentalism and all that stuff thrown into those, even though they're marketed to children, that someone like me at 32 can go back and have a critical assessment of in that way. I think that's beautiful because that means that I got the message. I want to move on to something a bit heavier now. Dark Souls. So the Dark Souls series is pretty lore heavy. It's built around environmental storytelling, and characters in the game that you interact with don't give you a whole lot. But you can see the way different characters believe the lies of the history they've been told, and you're left with this idea that nothing anybody knows is really true because no one will ever know the truth. The idea behind Dark Souls is humans a long time ago used to be these like zombie creature things, and they discovered fire, and in this world fire is very magical, and it made them more human, and in doing that they corrupted the world, which again we're seeing this theme here. So if you look at fire as like society or the invention of capitalism, or the sense of self that we as humans really cling to, believing so much that we are self and separate from all the other things that makes us better than supposedly everything else, it has corrupted the people in this world to believe that they need to keep the fires burning to retain their humanity, otherwise they will shrivel up and become undead creatures and, basically zombies. And that's really heavy. When you talk to all the characters, they all have different views about the world. They have very limited dialogue, and I'm going to premise this too by saying I've only played the first one. I've watched some videos on the other games, but I haven't gotten into them yet. But the fact that you get a lot of your information from the handful of sentences someone will give you, and then you have to compare that to like an item you picked up that's like, supposedly this ring was such and such a person in a revolt or whatever, and it's like you have to piece all these little things together to figure out what the story is. You're kind of told what the general story is. You are the chosen undead who's going to reclaim humanity and either continue the age of fire or enter an age of darkness. And supposedly the age of darkness is a good thing. By letting the last fire fade out and just walking away from it, essentially, you're saying like, no, something new needs to happen. We're breaking out of this toxic cycle. We've done this forever. It hasn't worked. We're not retaining our humanity. We're losing it by clinging to something that we think makes us more human than we actually are. And that speaks to me on such a deep level about how we cling to social norms, how we cling to capitalism or religion or systemic racism, and how sometimes we don't even realize that we're clinging to them, but we get defensive when people challenge our notions about them. And this idea that in Age of Darkness, to like reset things and start over, to let those fires burn out and just let humanity take its natural course, which, if I'm flashing back to what we just talked about in Pokemon, would be that we are nature and we are not supposed to be doing what we're doing to the rest of nature as we are. Burying those things together, marrying them together, I should say, just, chef's kiss. It's so heavy. It's so heavy to think that we as a society cling to these arbitrary machinations that don't actually exist. Money doesn't exist. Religion does not exist. Government does not exist. Countries, borders, continents do not exist. Those are names for things that already existed that did not have names until the arrogant human decided this is what I will call this. And we started drawing arbitrary lines, and we said, if you live on this side of the line, you're a good guy, and if you live on this side of the line, you're a bad guy, and if you live on that side of the line but you believe our religion, you're kind of a bad guy, but if you live on this side of the line and you don't believe our religion, you're definitely a bad guy. And you can see how all of these things are arbitrary and made up, and how the less that we believe in them and participate in them, the more they will simply fade into obscurity. And sometimes that has to come from extremely radical changes, and other times that can come slowly over time. Things just fade out of being. I believe we are at a point in humanity where we're approaching kind of a precipice where we will need to make a serious change very soon, or there will be no turning back from the damage that we've done. And some people have said for years that we've already hit that point and it's useless. Call me optimistic. I'm going to keep trying. I'm not trying to let this fire burn. I want this age of darkness to come so that we can see the light on the other side of it. Also, on a lighter note, lighter not really being a pun, but I could see how it works, Dark Souls introduces some of the hardest, most difficult gameplay in a game that I've played, and a lot of people agree with that. The game is unforgiving. It's not unfair, but it is unforgiving. If you don't know what you're doing when you fight different enemies or a boss, like, bosses seem obvious. If you're fighting a boss for the first time and you don't know their attacks, you're probably going to die because you haven't learned what they're capable of doing, and you'll be caught off guard and you will simply die. Your health pool is very limited compared to other games. It's not like other games where, like, you take a hit and you're like, ah, damn it, I'll try that again. You get hit once or twice, most of the time you're just dead. So you have to be very careful about how you approach these situations. And if you think that you're this big badass because in most games you get to level 99 or 100 and you're just champion of the world, nothing can stop you, you can still be outnumbered by the little minions that you fight throughout the game before you even get to bosses. So it's really fair in that you do not want to get surrounded or cornered. You don't want to rush in. You want to make time to plan things out. You want a consistent plan moving into a boss fight or a new area, especially if you've never played the game before. You don't just run through with your big sword and kill everything. You kind of can, but there will be spots where you are just killed with zero warning at all. You're just like, oh my god, I didn't see that guy and he threw a bomb at me, right? Or a crossbow. You're trying to pick off 3 or 4 guys who are coming at you, and someone's just like, click, click, and you're done. And even if the little guys you were fighting weren't doing anything, that one guy with the crossbow is just out of your reach, is picking you off. And there's elements of that throughout the game. So it's not unfair, it's just unforgiving. And if you don't know what you're doing going into a new area or going into a boss fight, you will die. And you learn through this that hardship is a reality, right? The idea of life in general being challenging. And again, I don't want to say that, well, anyone can do anything if they put their mind to it, because I understand there are systems in place that prevent some people from being able to do that, even in an almost perfect situation. But what I will say is, it does give you a sense of realism in that I can overcome hardship. I can work on it. I can make plans and follow through. I can accept that challenge will come. I can accept that death will come. I can accept that failure will come, and I can continue to move forward anyway. Dark Souls specifically has been one of the most frustrating games for me to play, because when I die, I lose the progress that I just made and have to go back and hope that I can reclaim it. Because when you die, you drop all of your, not your inventory, but your souls, which is your currency and your experience. They use souls as currency and experience in this game. And when you die, the first time that you die, you drop all your souls in one place. And then you have to fight your way back to where you died and hope that you pick them up. Because if you die again, You drop everything that you had on you, and you lose your original pile of souls, and you drop your new pile in its place. And you have to go back and collect that instead. So if I'm running through and I die with 10,000 and I make it back there with 400 and die, I lose the 10,000, and now I can only reclaim up to those 400 that I just got. So it's very unforgiving. It's very fair, but it's very unforgiving. The lore is super deep. I still don't understand it all. I'm learning more about it every day. I really appreciate the aspects of not knowing what is true because everyone believes something different and has their own opinion on it, and you have to make up your mind as a player about what you think is true. That's beautiful to me. That's for me, right, as a Satanist, as a self-empowered person pushing my way through my own life, that's what makes sense to me. Is like, I cannot believe any one thing is specifically true. I have to pull from multiple sources and choose what I believe is right based on as much facts and opinions as I'm presented, but also being able to be critical of my own thoughts and my own beliefs enough so that I can change my mind if I'm confronted with new or conflicting information that leads me to believe a new thing, because I never want to be typecast and I never want to be stuck in one way of thinking. I like to think that I grow and I learn a little bit more every day, and there's a lot of that element that you can see in the Dark Souls series. So I'm gonna roll this back to something a little bit more fun and still heavy. This whole thing is kind of heavy, but a different theme, right? You've kind of seen how I started off on this dualism, right? Like, Kingdom Hearts is like fun and goofy with some serious elements. Elder Scrolls is like pretty serious. Then Pokemon is pretty goofy with some serious elements. Dark Souls is really serious with heavy elements. Now I'm going to talk about another game series I loved called Banjo-Kazooie. So it came out for the Nintendo 64 back in the 90s. It was one of the first games I ever owned. I loved that game. I did not realize until like 5 years ago when a friend pointed out that every single character in the game is either an animal or an anthropomorphic vegetable, and then the bad guys are the humans. And that blew my mind as someone who I think is environmentally conscious about the message that's sending, which is that these animal people are doing just fine until this jealous witch human, because that's the main antagonist, is Gruntilda the witch. She's jealous of the beauty of your main character's sister, so kidnaps her because she wants to make herself attractive. And to whom? Right? For her own vanity, because there's basically no one else around. I haven't kept up with the series. I played the first 2 games for Nintendo 64, but you can see how human intervention in the different worlds that you visit has caused pollution and corruption. You visit, like, what is it called? There's a bay in one of them where there's an oil rig and it's just polluted all the water around it, and when you swim in the water you slowly choke until you die because there's oil in it. Like, you can't even swim in it above the water. If you go under, you drown quicker, but if you're swimming on top of it, you're losing health. There's one level is like a carnival, and you can see that, like, there's no health regulations and it's just disgusting. It's all these little things, right? Like, there's a factory level that's just polluting the environment around it. All of these little things really add up to, if you're the animal main character, which is Banjo and his best friend Kazooie, who is a bird. It's a really, really goofy concept, like I said, but, like, Banjo the bear and Kazooie, his best friend, who sits in his backpack and just helps him fly and peck enemies to death. Super lighthearted, fun, and goofy, and then has all these environmental underlying messages of, like, fighting against the corrupt witch who's using technology and pollution to destroy the environment, and all for her own gain. That's the kicker, right? She's like this kind of stereotype of a capitalist who's like, I don't care as long as I'm rich, powerful, and beautiful, and then just letting the world go to shit around her because she's the only seeable human in that game at that point. Later in the series they introduce some more human characters, but almost all of the humans are edgy and corrupt, and I think that's super interesting. So if you've got something from this video, it's that, one, I love video games and I love talking about them. Two, video games are political. They've always been. Again, there are exceptions like Tetris and Pong and stuff like that. But when you look at story-focused video games, there tend to be political themes running through them. There is a lot of pushback, especially by people on the right, who say that things shouldn't have a political agenda. But that's a political agenda all of its own, right? If what I view as political is typically political when it agrees with me. And it's weird because people on the right tend to view things as political as things they don't agree with. So things just are, and then things are political. Whereas for me, it's every single thing I do every day is political. And I have choices to make, and those determine how I treat people and what part I'm playing in the systems the systems in place. And knowing that, and knowing that I have video games that are giving me positive messaging that reinforces that I'm doing the right things by being environmentally conscious, by considering the impact technology has on nature, by, the power of friendship. I used to think that was really corny, and as I got older, I've started to really appreciate that I have friends and support systems in place because people care about me. So playing all those games where it's the power of friendship will, that's how you win. Yeah, it's goofy, but it's also lighthearted and wholesome, and I appreciate it more as an adult who grew up in a lot of cynicism and skepticism about the world, to understand that I'm only doing well at this point in my life because I have people around me who care about me. So all of these themes, right, they didn't individually shape my politics, but they helped. They helped send me positive messaging. If I didn't understand that the choices that I make have impact, if I didn't understand that humans in general are doing terrible things to the environment, or that we all have different power within us, whether that's light or darkness or whatever, to do good or bad things with. Understanding all of these aspects, how people use religion and government to oppress each other in forms of racism and imperialism and colonialism, the fact that two different countries can essentially border each other and have totally drastically different cultures, up to and including laws that are totally different, right? It blows my mind that a country that can actually outlaw the existence of queer people in the public eye can border a country that is a safe haven for them. And that exists in our world today, right? Russia is a place that exists where it is illegal to be gay, and if you're accused of being gay, it can mean the worst. And that's bordered by some countries that have lax or even safe haven laws. And that blows my mind, right? But knowing how religion and politics play a part in that, knowing how corporations are destroying the environment, and how helpless we feel as humans. When I play games like this, I know other people are getting the message, right? Even if they're single-player games, I'm playing them by myself, I'm still feeling less alone because I know someone else is playing that game and getting the message. But on the other end of that, someone else is playing the game and just going, yeah, it's a fucking great game, man. I don't know why these lefties got to put all these politics in it, blah, 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 blah. Well, not every game was made by a leftist, certainly, let alone a liberal. And they still can have positive messaging in them, and I think that's important. There's a greater topic I could get onto about how media in general as woke as conservatives try to claim media is becoming, is still very conservative, even if it's got liberal programming. But even if it's liberal, it is not left. It would be drastically different if it was leftist media. I consider myself a leftist media channel, if you can't tell, if you haven't watched my other videos. So you're not going to get, I'm not going to cozy up to liberals, and I'm certainly not going to cozy up to conservatives. But also, my critiques are going to lie more in what I'm doing and what I think other people could be doing to further progressive ideals. I'm not one of those people who's going to spend time on the internet arguing with either liberals or conservatives, because it's a waste of time. I want to organize with people who I know are like-minded. I want to meet people where they're at and find what it is that drives them and work on common goals together. And if that is radical leftist ideology, then welcome. You're here. So all of that wrapped up is that video games are awesome. They've driven a lot of my life so far. They have been both a crutch and a problem at various times in my life. But the underlying themes of different games that I've played have given me a better idea about how I should carry myself and how I treat other people and how I treat the world. So, if you like what you saw here, you know what to do. Click all of the buttons, like, subscribe, follow, share with your friends, tell them I love video games, tell them I'm gay. It's no surprise. Do all of the things. I'm going to be here, hopefully same time next week, and we'll have a new topic. I'm working on my first ever guest speaker, so that's some new news, and we'll see how this develops. Throw me some cash if you want. Currently just doing this to do it. If it grows, great. If it doesn't, I'm still having fun. I like talking about these things. I like talking about them with other people. Comment below. Message me on Instagram. Follow me on Threads and not Twitter. I'm going to continue to dead name Twitter. Because I think it's funny. Do not follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Threads. Throw me some money, because I'm doing this for free for you. Follow me on all of the things and share, and yeah, I think I covered all the bases there. Play more video games, but not too much. Play good video games. What's a good video game? A game that you enjoy. If you only enjoy playing puzzle games on your phone, great. I don't think there's necessarily political or religious or philosophical undertones to those, but there could be. I'm not going to explore them because that would take way too long, but I'm glad that I've had the time that I have with the games that I've played and can bring a positive message out of them to y'all, which is stay cool, stay good, be good to the environment, be good to each other, treat people kindly. We're all struggling with different things, and most importantly, continue to be and love who you are and who supports you.